Now, Mr. Sekiguchi, please take the floor. Thank you very much. I'm Sekiguchi, editor writer of Nikkei newspaper. So we would like to start the very final session of the two-day event. How did you enjoy the two-day event? I have been here all day, yesterday and today. And of course, I have to listen to all the sessions to make sure that we can have this final discussion. I have learned so many things. Abenomics started in Japan, and Japanese economy is beginning to recover, but we are not as fast or as strong as the rest of the world. In Asia, things are changing very fast. Internet and IT is showing new dynamics, so how can we catch up with that dynamics and take leadership? We believe that's the final picture where the Abenomics is going for. Now, yesterday, I remember hearing Mr. Hirai of Cisco, director of Jane, said that the first revolution of Internet was latter half of the 90s. And during this revolution, business was digitized or went into the Internet. That was the process. And in the 2000s, there was a social revolution. Communication between people has changed dramatically. And in the 2010s and recently, we have seen some major digitization and changes. Now, Internet is coming into the industry. So this was basically agriculture and other, well, maybe education and medicine was partly impacted by the Internet, but there was no strong competition yet. But we're now in a phase where major changes will happen in these new areas of industry. Last fall, we had an event, and GE, Jeff Immelt, the chairman, was invited for this kind of interview or panel discussion. And Mr. Immelt said that the industrial Internet, for example, attaching a lot of sensors to the jet engine of an aircraft to understand how the engine performed, and the data can be accumulated. And then we can basically fundamentally change the structure of the jet engine and increase the productivity. So this is how the whole industry and the different companies can be more productive. And we are now entering this new phase, I believe. Now, Mr. David Chang of DCM said something interesting as well. The first revolution of the Internet started in Silicon Valley in the United States, and then it came to Japan, and then went into the rest of Asia. So there were maybe 3 different steps. And Japan was one of the earlier countries that went into this, and we had an advantage. But now we have the cloud revolution or the smartphone revolution, and IoT and industrial Internet revolutions happening right now. And this is actually happening simultaneously in multiple parts of the world. So if we do not try to catch up very fast, maybe overseas countries or companies will take the best part of this. Of course, this is not a zero-sum discussion, but last November, I went to the Slash event in Finland, and Peter Vestraka talked about, well, he's the organizer of the event. Yes, I can see you right there, wearing the red hoodie. And actually 6,000 ventures were gathered. So this started with 300 people 60 years ago. Now we have 6,000 people gathering. As you may know, Finland had Nokia, or has Nokia. Used to be the largest mobile phone company in the world. But they basically could not catch up with the dynamics of the mobile phone industry, and now it's part of Microsoft. And many personnels were available within Finland who used to work for Nokia. So in order to utilize these human resources, the government decided to help and start to do the venture. And Mr. Katainen, the Prime Minister, came, and he was wearing this Team Finland hoodie. He's 42, he's still young. So he went up on stage and showed his enthusiasm. Nobody is talking about the failure of Nokia anymore. Everybody was talking about how Finland can become a leader again in this field, and how to best gather the best talents from around the world. So Prime Minister of Russia was also there, and Son Taizo was joining from Japan as well, Supercell as well. So this was a representation of ecosystem. And now the question, the challenge for us is how can we build such an ecosystem in Japan? So you heard about the Silicon Valley in the previous session. And yes, the bureaucrats say we should build the Silicon Valley in Japan, but I don't think we can replicate Silicon Valley in Japan. So how can we leverage the geographical advantage and other advantage that we have in Japan and then create a new ecosystem or platform or new environment to help entrepreneurship? Now we have 4 excellent panelists who can talk about how we can materialize these ideas. Now, organizer of this event, from Rakuten, we have Mr. Mikitani, and he's a member of the Industrial Competitiveness Council as well, and he's actively making comments, advice at these meetings as well. So please summarize the event and also what Japan should do going forward. Please welcome Mr. Mikitani's comment with a round of applause. Well, I would like to thank all of you for the 2-day events. It's been a long haul, but I participated from beginning to end. And actually, I'm the luckiest one because I benefited the most. And right now, there are so many things going on in my brains. It's really revving up. And I mentioned before that the direction of my company management changed direction by about 30 degrees because of this event. So I truly believe that this event is extremely important, even for myself. Now, the third arrow of Abenomics has to be supported by promotion of entrepreneurship, and Jane can be the center of this activity to nurture the entrepreneurship spirit, and we can help build a global environment. And instead of being so-called Galapagos, we can start global ventures in Japan, which I believe is very important. Now, in the beginning, I would like to talk about the discussion. This is the corporate committee under the Industrial Competitiveness Council, and we have submitted 7 items of advice, suggestions. So I would like to talk about them one by one. First of all, high corporate tax rate in Japan, as was written in the newspaper today. And in the West, the effective rate is actually very low, although the at first look it looks like it's very high, but in fact it's only like 1 digit. And somewhere in the middle of the teens is the corporate tax rate in the West. So in Japan it's too high, has to be brought down. Now, we have to review the regulations that would inhibit the ventures. Now, e-government will mean that GDP will be pushed up by about 2% according to some trial calculations. So we talked about Uber. Uber started in Japan as well, working together with KM Taxi, but they still have a very small number of vehicles. Airbnb was mentioned frequently today as well. They were both here last year for this event. And there are many regulations in Japan, so they cannot really freely operate within Japan. So legacy regulations will have to be overhauled thoroughly, which we believe is very important. Next slide, please. And corporate culture. There should be some kind of award system or medal giving system by the government. And yes, the government has actually started considering this seriously. And another point. So I think we no longer live in an era where we only talk about Japan or Japanese. We have to think about whole Asia and become the Silicon Valley of Asia rather than just Japan. We need to become the hub of Asia. Right now, everything is aggregated in Singapore, but instead of Singapore, we should bring everything to Japan. And if a venture company wants to list, then they should move the headquarters to Japan. That's what we want to see happen. So first of all, the income tax has to be lowered for entrepreneurs and engineers. And maybe this is a reverse kind of differentiation. But another one is IPO, capital gain. I'm not talking about the transfer of shares, but only for IPO and exit. Instead of 20%, it should be 10%, or it should be halved. And this is just by the way. And I was talking about this as a dessert. But as a big city, we have to provide more entertainment. We have to make it more attractive. And young people come and they want to go somewhere at night. And the only things attractive they can find is a karaoke box, because all the clubs and discos need to close at 12 o'clock, midnight. And I kept telling the government it's no good. And the LDP said that maybe dancing will be permitted under the current entertainment law. So we have to keep working at it. And we need to run a questionnaire to overseas investors to see why Japan is evaluated so low or poorly. And in order to generate innovation, we need to have necessary human resources. So similar to the UK, we should strengthen the programming education.
ギターもかなりですね、アングリーバードというゲームから今
they started with a game called Angry Bird, and now they're going into education, and programming education has also been reinforced and strengthened, and therefore from early years of primary school, perhaps programming should be trained. Also providing entrepreneurship or startup education from early, I think is necessary. Also, we have to create a startup ecosystem, and young engineers with good ideas, or businessmen with good ideas, and senior managers with more experience, to combine these two people together. I think combinations are very important. Of course, there are people who can do it alone, but when you look at the U.S., Larry and Alex Schmidt, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, these combinations worked. Or for eBay, Meg Whitman came in from an early stage. So I think in Japan, large corporate managers with rich experience don't come to venture firms very much. So we need to create a system where we can create that coupling or pairing. And also for your reference, angel tax systems are being discussed at the Tax System Reform Council, and in the LDP tax system guidelines, they're talking about the capital gain and loss. You can aggregate loss and gain, but there's talk of making this unable to aggregate the loss for capital gain for the private and public shares. And anywhere you go in the world, this doesn't happen. And there has not been even one venture company which has received angel tax system. So we should maintain the current system where we'll be able to aggregate the loss and profit from the transfer income on private and public listed shares. And I don't know why this cannot be accepted. We have to continue this. Otherwise, risk money would not flow into ventures. That's the key. And so we're discussing this possibility with the finance ministry right now. That's it for me. Thank you. Now then, Kumagai-san, please. Yes. I'm Kumagai of GMO. Nice to meet you. Now, Sekiguchi-san has given me some homework. So I did prepare some materials. If you could show the materials on the screen, please. Yes. This is the homework given to me from Sekiguchi-san. There were 3 questions. One is, what should we do to accelerate the third arrow of Abenomics? And second, what should we do to increase the number of new ventures in Japan? And third, what policies are necessary to make the IT revolution succeed in Japan? I think those, in a nutshell, were his 3 questions. So going on to the next page, I believe that we should, well, both within and without Japan, and I say this always, business, when translated into Japanese, is not shigoto or work, but the business should be translated into competition. And now with the flourishing of the internet, we are having to play in the international global playing field. And somebody talked about simultaneous, but we have to win out against the competition. That's our environment. However, Japanese ventures, they don't have a level playing field. And I'd like to raise 3 points why the playing field is not level. Well, the first topic is about the corporate taxes. One big premise is that we, myself and we, are ventures. Of course, we are businessmen. So what we can do by ourselves, we will do by ourselves. But there are 3 points that I can't do. I can't change. I'm not placing the blame on others, but one is corporate taxes. Mikitani-san talked about this as his first point. Next page, please. And without the approval of the other 3, I created this chart. This is Rakuten, Cyber, and GREE's pre-tax profit. This is in oku yen. Mikitani-san has 88 billion, CyberAgent 20 billion, GREE 41 billion, and we at Gmail only 10 billion. Embarrassing. And the taxes that we paid, and then the orange is the final effective tax rate that we paid, and that these 4 companies paid. A total of 160 billion yen in pre-tax profits were generated by the 4 companies, and all 4 together paid 76 billion to the government. That's 48% effective tax rate on average. This is Facebook, Amazon, and Google. Last year's pre-tax profits, and to make it comparable, I calculated at 100 yen to the dollar. And so this is in oku yen, and the total of the 3 companies was 1,765 billion yen, and they paid 361 billion yen. Look at the tax rate at the bottom right-hand corner. Facebook is 45, but Google is 15, Amazon 32%. It's average of 20% tax rate. 20%. In the US, in Japan, it's 48%. This is the situation as we view the world today. This is on an annual basis. What happens if you continue this 10 years consecutive? Corporations pay taxes and they will reinvest or pay out as dividend payout what's left. Of course, they have to pay a dividend to the shareholders, and what they can reinvest is very, very small. Every year, there will be a difference, a wider gap in the amount that can be reinvested if the tax rates differ at this rate. So, of course, we're ventures. We'll do what we can do alone, but this tax rate has to be changed by the government. We can't do this. That's the first point. Second point, you can't save money in Japan. By doing business in Japan, there's no money left to invest. Second is IFRS, International Financial Reporting Systems. In the international accounting systems, there's the IFRS and the JGAAP, that is the Japanese GAAP, and the international IFRS. And in October of last year, it was amended, it was revised. And now, for example, my company is studying and preparing to adopt IFRS, the international accounting systems, but until last October, the internet revolution had been continuing for 19 years, and we had been accounting under our books under the Japanese GAAP. And this had the issue of a goodwill write-down, because goodwill, when you M&A your company, the company's balance sheet, on the balance sheet will be the net assets plus the difference between the net assets and the purchase acquisition price. And you have to write this down, depreciate it over 10 years. And this goodwill, in the case of IFRS, there's no write-down, whereas in Japanese corporations, there is goodwill write-down or depreciation. There is some type of M&As that's not possible for Japanese listed companies, because overseas companies, they don't have goodwill write-down. They can do M&A easier than Japanese M&As. Of course, the rules changed last October, but it's very difficult to change overnight because other ancillary systems have to be changed. And because of this system, we are not playing on a level playing field. And ventures going forward will have to adopt the international accounting standards, and they will have to match the playing field with the other companies, with overseas countries. And third, this is mentioned by Mikitani-san, this is education. Our educational system is riddled with problems. We can't change this. We have to change the mentality of other people. We talked about technology. We talked about English capability. What I want to say is about the mindset. This is a fundamental issue. In the Nikkei newspaper, Mr. Okada, who was reported in Silicon Valley, came back to Japan, and I had an occasion to have to talk with him, and Okada-san talked about the graduation ceremony at a Silicon Valley junior high school, and this was so impressive, so stimulating. And in Japanese graduation ceremonies at junior high schools, the principal and other guests will talk about really commonplace things. You must work hard and become good workers. But Steve Jobs, Garage was a company. He founded his company in a garage, and the principal of the company that's 5 minutes away told his graduates the following. He said, "There are only two types of people," he said. "There are only two types of people," the principal said. "One are those types of people who will change the world, and the others are those who will not. After you graduate, which of these types of people will you be?" Those are the words of the principal. It's fundamentally different. I saw that wholesale difference between Japan and the United States, and I felt that Japanese education has to be overhauled or to be changed fundamentally. So the taxes, the accounting systems, and education, these are three things that must be changed in Japan, but things that we cannot change. We have to leave it up to the government. I have some extra topics I wish to discuss. I'm not over yet. I talked about taxes, and now let's look at earnings. I'm sorry, I created this chart without your approval. Sorry about this. But with these four companies together, it's 160 billion yen. Facebook, Amazon, Google is making 1,765 billion yen. The biggest problem in Japan is that people like us on the stage, I hate to say it, but the fact that we are here, the member of the panel are here, being celebrated on the stage as successors, as people who succeeded. That's the problem of Japan. We have to work harder. We have to take more risks. We have to start up more companies and create global mega ventures. That was my impression. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Fujita of CyberAgent. Yes, I'm one of the directors of Jane. My name is Fujita. So Jane started as an e-business group, and I've been a part of that with Mr. Mikitani since the beginning. And yes, there was a comment about a small profit. CyberAgent celebrates its 17th year this year. And I'm 40 years old now, and our employees are in their 98% of our employees are in their 20s and 30s. And our motto has always been the same. New people have to develop new areas, so not the old interest, but we want to start a new internet business using new people. That's always been our motto. So regulation has to be revisited, overhauled, but we have never really tried to, well, we have not really struggled with regulation, maybe once or twice over the last 17 years. And the reason we decided to go into new areas of business is the following. If you look at large corporations in Japan with conventional business, they move too slowly. Isayama-san said they move fast, but they don't. We are venture-backed companies, and there are new opportunities spreading very fast, and we panic and we try to be really fast. But large enterprises are too slow, so we don't really want to do business with them. And if we want to change the regulations, for example, in agriculture, it's the regulations are too strong, and people with vested interests resist very strongly against changes in regulations. So, for example, in order to permit sales of medicine online, we had to go through so many difficulties. So it's very difficult to change regulations. Large enterprises move too slowly, and that's basically too slow for them. So we decided to work with new people and go into new areas all the time in the last 17 years. And of course, corporate tax problem is important. Regulations need to be changed. That's also important. But one thing that I believe is important after running the company for 17 years is the following. Having a backup of the government or the nation is very important. Now, venture-backed companies should be successful. Innovation should be generated and the world should be changed. And Kumagai-san talked about the Silicon Valley junior high school graduation ceremony, and the principal saying this. So I think it's very important to live in an atmosphere where people believe that it's important to change the world. When the live door incident happened, as you know, people look at you as if you're doing something wrong. Children and elderly people will look at you as if you're doing something wrong, and the venture-backed company's image really deteriorated during that period. Now, Jane was participated by the Prime Minister and many important ministers, which is very significant for us. And also after this summit, what would happen is, as Mikitani-san explained, we will be presenting our recommendation to the government. Now we have about 3,000 employees, and I manage this big company, and I do feel social responsibility. That is why I'm the director of Jane. But I'm not really involved with the government so much in my own business. So, to be honest, I didn't really want to be involved in the beginning, but I learned a great deal. New economy is not vested interest. We don't have anything to protect. So we don't really need to change things that the government is already doing. But if we don't say anything, we lose in the end, because people with vested interest will try to influence the government with everything they can do. So if the new economy does not really say anything, then we basically lose. I don't think the deregulation for the online drug sales would have worked without us saying anything. And Mikitani-san talked about it's important to continue to assert our opinion for the entertainment law as well. So I'm very happy that we could hold this summit. It's been very meaningful. And Mikitani-san talked about the award system by the government. This is something that I would definitely want to endorse. Something like a medal to honor the important people of Japan. So the venture business persons should receive a medal from the government. People who generated major innovations and changed the world should be awarded and should be recognized by the government, by the nation. And everybody will see it. I think that would be very influential. That's all from me. Thank you. Please give him a big round of applause. Moving on to Tanaka-san. Tanaka-san, you're not really a member of Jane, but well, you are a member, but not the director. I'm sorry. I'm Tanaka of GREE. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to talk about what I believe is important. Exactly 1 year ago, I was at this event, and I was just thinking, what's changed in the last 12 months? And the biggest difference I see is stock market going up because of Abenomics. And many Japanese people have regained confidence and enthusiasm over the last year. It's a huge difference. 1 or 2 years ago, people felt like the poor economy will not change and we would have no idea how to compete in the global market. And everybody was feeling weak. But with the leadership of Mr. Abe, Abenomics started. And the strong leadership really influenced people's sentiment. And it helped improve the economy. And over the last 12 months or so, we could really feel people regaining their confidence. So I believe as leaders, it's important to generate positive atmosphere. And after creating the right environment, we need to change the rules of the society and regulations. I think we're now entering a phase of a true regrowth. And this is something that is required of the whole Japanese society. And as Sekiguchi-san mentioned, internet industry is new. And in the past, we were just focusing on pure technology and telecommunications. But now, we are entering a new era where we can really transform different industries. Our company is based in San Francisco. We have 400 employees, and I manage the company. In the United States, pure internet telecommunication is no longer the thing. Now, we are beginning to see growth of internet in industry. So it's not just a question of technology. We have to communicate with the society and change regulations and provide new services. And when you're in San Francisco or in New York, you can really feel that these city governments are very helpful. When you come up with a new idea of a new business, then they will try to help you with that. So if the internet is going to transform many industries and Japan is entering a new phase, new era, regulations will have to be changed. And I believe these changes that are happening overseas will be happening in Japan as well. So regulations will need to be changed and a new industry will have to be born. And right now, we are facing major changes in Japan as well. This is a great opportunity. So it's very important for us to take the model role. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanaka-san. Mikitani-san at the outset gave us some specific recommendations. We don't want to go one by one because it will take time, but I think there are largely 3 recommendations. One is, that is deregulation, that is to work on the government, things that will not change, rules that cannot be changed without government intervention. Second is changing the entrepreneurship culture, a culture that celebrates entrepreneurship, how to create an environment, an ecosystem for this. And third is nurturing global resources, human resources, how to nurture people who can compete on the global scale. So those, I think, largely put, are the 3 issues. Of course, we're talking about the 20% corporate tax, but my first question is, how can we change policy? I know Mikitani-san is working very hard, and bureaucrats, you know, I've been with the newspaper for 30 years, so I know this. And there are very good, excellent, capable people in the government, but the bureaucracy doesn't change very quickly. And vested interests, because they use a lot of money in politics. Of course, the vested interests have strong sway over the Japanese diet, and which means that we'll have to change that by gaining more force for change. And so numbers create force, which means that we have to aggregate our voice, our numbers together and create a large force which can compete against the diet without having to go through the parliamentary system. So what can we do? Well, to be very frank with you, yesterday the Prime Minister made an opening speech, and it was very encouraging. And of course, the issue of the constitution, diplomacy, there are a lot of political capital is being focused in these two areas right now. But yesterday he talked about increasing the startup rate and corporate closure rate to 10%, and the my number system introduction, etc. He made some very concrete suggestions, which is very encouraging. Also, this conference today, of course, we've invested a lot of resources into this convention. I should be working on Rakuten business rather than organizing a conference. But the reason we began this Rakuten was because we wanted to become role models. And for entrepreneurs, we wanted to create a trend of entrepreneurship or venture startups. And that's the reason why we are organizing this conference. And that's the same reason we established Jane. So we want to expand this activity going forward. And I want to create this conference into the Davos of the IT industry in Asia. China, South Korea, Thailand, Singapore are all represented here at this conference. We'd like to invite more and more Asians to this NES New Economy Summit. And perhaps we can invite more politicians to attend, or bureaucrats to come, or maybe representatives of large corporations, large businesses, so that they can feel the changing trend or changing tides of the world. That's very important. We're only in our second year, and you're paying a lot of money to attend, and I really appreciate that very much. So I do hope that we can, increase the momentum behind this NES New Economy Summit. Thank you. Mr. Kumagai talked about the tax rate or tax system. I totally agree. When you look around the world today, and there are several countries which are successful with the internet revolution. Ireland, for example, reduced their corporate tax rate to 10% in order to attract U.S. corporations. Of course, after the financial crisis, they increased it to 12%. Finland has reduced their corporate tax rate, or are reducing their tax rate to 20%. So Japan is still pegged at a very high level. And normally you'd hear people objecting. But why don't we hear objections in Japan? That's because there are only a handful of companies in Japan who are generating a profit and therefore paying taxes. And so they're not raising their voices. And companies like yours who are paying a lot of taxes, you will muster your voices together against the tax system because you are paying taxes. So how can we raise our voices high to change politics? And of course, Jane is one idea, but Kumagai-san, are there any other ideas? Well, the reason I joined Jane was because Mikitani-san called me on my smartphone one day, and he said, Kumagai-san, well, of course, Yahoo left, and that's when he called me. But if I get a phone call direct from Mikitani-san, I had to do it, so I did. But at that time, it was called the E-Business Promotion Federation. But before I knew it, the name changed to the Shinkeiren, or Japan Association of New Economy, Jane. But Fujita-san, in light of our social responsibility, I thought that we should cooperate with Mikitani-san in order to provide more momentum to this movement. And I think the best thing about it is that, well, if Mikitani-san perhaps can run for the prime ministership, that would be the best thing if he became prime minister. No chance? Okay. I phoned him during the Tokyo gubernatorial race, but he didn't answer my phone. In any event, we need people with a venture spirit to become politicians. We live in a democracy, and so we should vote for these types of people who work for ventures. That's the basis, because we can't change overnight. With the current politicians, it'll be difficult to change. So we have to recognize the fact that we live in a democracy, and we need to vote for venture-oriented politicians so that they can create innovation in the political scene. Now, there was talk about those people who change the world and those who do not. The dichotomy. Morikawa-san was talking about the crazy people and the non-crazy people who are very smart. I'm not saying that you're crazy, by the way, but at least you have a positive mindset of trying to change. But as Mikitani-san said, there are people who are very smart and can make do with what they have. And they're the majority of people, and they are leaders of the current big companies and the politics and bureaucrats. So how can we shift them to our camp? Of course, there's the issue of income tax, etc. But we need to create a culture that celebrates people who succeed. And Kumagai-san, how can we create? Do you have any good ideas about how we can create a society that celebrates such successful people? Well, you said that I'm not trying to say that you're crazy, but Sekiguchi-san, crazy is actually a word of praise for us. Before they talked about the chore bokai, which means to change your opinion overnight. But that's a good thing now because it means speedy management. And geeks used to be not a very good word, but now the geeks are people who are being promoted, and it's the geeks who are developing good services at my company. So we have to change our mentality 100%. We have to increase the number of crazy people in the world. And as Fujita-san said, we need to create a national culture or system which celebrates and decorates, recognizes those people who were crazy. And we do have a system of decorations, ribbons and awards in Japan. But I've never seen young people being decorated like that. And I think the system is made so that it's only given to people over a certain age period, and they receive it just before they die. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to step on any toes, but I don't know about this. But young people who generate innovation, we should create a system where the government will decorate them with awards. We can't do it alone with just the corporations. Corporations work together. We need some kind of yes, these people are decorated only after they graduate from private sector companies and work for a certain period of time and contribute at government-run corporations or institutions. So how can we increase these kinds of entrepreneurs who have that kind of mentality? Do you have any good ideas? Well, after the Live Door scandal, Horie-san was crazy in his own right, but after the Live Door stigma scandal, young people tend to be very well behaved. But in a sense, they're not out of the box. And I think this ambience in society tends to change the mindset of entrepreneurs. And after Live Door, Nikkei's in a venture article in the Nikkei newspaper also disappeared. So creating innovation is very wonderful. San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the wonderful entrepreneurs. We have to compete with them. Apple, Google, Facebook, these are global standard companies that developed global standard services, and we need to have the motivation to develop similar companies in Japan. We want the government, the nation, and the mass media to encourage us. And creating that ambience, that climate is like Abenomics. That is, you blow the trumpet first, and then things will follow.
僕は思うんですけどね。
I was just thinking, we shouldn't limit this to Japanese people alone. Trend Micro, originally a Taiwanese company, they have headquarters in Japan, and they're listed as a Japanese company, for example. So if we cannot find good personnel within the Japanese population, bring in non-Japanese and create an environment within Japan where they can start up new business. I mean, 70% of the engineers that we hire are non-Japanese. And they cannot speak Japanese at first, but they're all smart, so they learn Japanese very quickly. And 30% right now in total is non-Japanese, and that creates diversity within Rakuten. And in China, there's a lot of environmental issues, and they find it difficult to live there. Singapore has a low tax rate, but it's really hot. The weather's hot, to be realistic. And Japan is really good. I mean, Tokyo is an excellent city to live in. So we should take advantage of that fact and gather the best people from all over Asia. I mean, Silicon Valley didn't have a native venture population. People come from all over the world to Silicon Valley. So my idea is to turn Tokyo into Silicon Valley of Asia. And that would naturally change the mindset of Japanese people as well. So using English is a major step toward that end. But the conservative people in Japan will still see you as doing something crazy. No, I think they stopped saying that already. Oh, that's good. So I talked about Finland earlier, and I visited there in 2003. Nokia was still strong, and the large enterprise was the core of society. And 10 years after, in 2013, I saw that all the young people speak fluent English. Their country is completely different, and because they can speak English, it means that they can hire people from overseas as well and generate innovation in technological development. So Peter is not just thinking about Europe, he's thinking about Eurasia continent. And he wants to, well, they want to become the Silicon Valley of the Eurasian continent. So Japan can do the same within Asia. Well, we're getting so many ex-Google, ex-Facebook, non-Japanese nationals coming to Japan. They want to come to Japan. Great food, safe society, and not so much discrimination. So Tanaka-san, how can we make Japan more attractive to attract great talents like overseas engineers? Visa is a problem. We're talking about innovative workers, so maybe we can issue special visas for them. We have an investment site in Singapore with our company. And there are many young people who would be working in Silicon Valley, but they're working for us in Singapore. So I asked them why they wanted to work for us. And if you have an MBA or graduate from a famous university in the United States, you cannot get the visa. So they decided to join the investment division of GREE. So visa issuance is a major problem for some people. In other words, if Japan issues visa to skilled personnel, they will come to Japan. So some people wanted to work in America, but they couldn't because they didn't get a visa, and Singapore was a second choice. Japan could become the second choice instead of Singapore. So issuing visas to these skilled personnel is something that we can do without spending too much money. So I think it's a very effective way of attracting good personnel. It's also important to be exposed to true entrepreneurship. So sometimes we send our people to Silicon Valley to make sure that they work with people who are in Silicon Valley and they can learn how to do business differently. Some things you cannot just explain. You can send people to Silicon Valley for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and have them have a direct experience. So if people come to Japan, that's great. But we can also visit Singapore, Silicon Valley rather, and learn something and bring it back. So we should actively go out to places where entrepreneurship is already active and brings things back to Japan as well. I forgot to mention something very important. Larry Erison, Peter, we have had some really great people, and we have not paid any of these presenters, actually. So it's such a great story. I mean, they're coming here without being paid. And maybe the people in the audience are thinking, why are you charging us to participate? But it costs money to organize the event. That's why. But that's such a moving story, I think. I go out and, for example, to the United States and go out for a drink and ask these people to come to present at these events. I mean, Larry Ellison has never spoken at a non-Oracle event. But he loves Japan. I knew that. And I said, this is cherry blossom season. Of course you're going to come to Kyoto, right? And he said, yes, I'm going to Kyoto. So I said, why don't you come to Tokyo as well? And I basically didn't take no for an answer. But him being here, presenting to this audience, really shows how much he loves Japan. Japanese culture, cities, and food. I think he really respects different aspects of Japan. And we have to basically globalize Japan as much as we can. So if we continue to do the same every time at this event, third time, fourth time, then people will stop coming to present. So we have to change. We have to make sure that things will change. Now, I think things have changed over the last 12 months. For example, we can already see some results from the Abenomics, and we have to really appreciate this momentum, not waste it. Japan has become more attractive, and we have to be good in certain specific areas, I think. So what should we focus on as Japan to be the leader in a particular area? Of course, we talked about manufacturing for so long, and the internet was maybe not given enough importance in the past. But Japanese culture, Japanese content can be digitized, and as we heard in the earlier session, Japanese culture can be promoted to overseas market using the internet. Now, Fujita-san, I'm sure that you're trying many new things. Do you have any strategic area that you think we should focus on as Japan? Well, as you mentioned, Sekiguchi-san, in the past, things used to happen in the United States first, and then come to Japan or come to China. And that was the innovation. But now we're talking about revolution. And this revolution is happening simultaneously in many different parts of the world. And people try to copy what's happening, and the copying is too slow. So rather than copying and mimicking, we now have to create things ourselves. So rather than following San Francisco or Silicon Valley, we should do something of our own. Now, CyberAgent is located in Shibuya, Dogenzaka, and our office is right next to a love hotel. Silicon Valley has beautiful weather, and it's a beautiful place, but we work in a place full of people's base desires. But I believe that the content that we provide is very true to the base nature of people and their desires. So we will try to create something global and try to localize and provide it in different parts of the world. So that's how we can play our game as a company manager. Tanaka-san, what do you think? Where do you think we should fight as Japan? How do we pick up fights? Well, we're doing games, and game is actually a great theme. We're not making games in order to be global, but if I look at what we have done so far, and so many games generated from Japan and have become global as well. So I think a game is one of the businesses that was really suitable or suited to Japan, and that's why we have been so successful looking back. Now, I try to develop games in different countries. If you have technology and a lot of engineers, that's not really enough. We have to have high level of aggregation of culture. Otherwise, you cannot make a good game. Even if you have technology for making movies, if you have never seen movies before, you cannot make a good movie. That's the idea. In Japan, we have 130 million people who have high level of a culture. And I think that's why we have been successful in game and entertainment. So we need to identify business that Japan is strong. For example, we have to identify industries that we can be successful with, that is suitable for Japan, suited to Japan, rather than trying to find something that can be globalized. Now, in the past, Japan was basically playing a catch-up game. And we used to see this picture, Japan versus US or Europe. But now everything is happening simultaneously, so we have to really go into the game and take the leadership. While in the Industrial Competitive Council, one of the biggest themes that we discuss is the key focus. So government, bureaucracy, industry, will they choose these key areas of focus, or will they leave it up to the market? So what about making a fund by the government and private sector? And maybe METI will decide specifically where to invest, or maybe the decision is made by the market. That's always discussed. Now, I believe that markets should decide where to focus. It's not a decision for the government or the bureaucrats to make, and we don't have to even discuss that. How can we make an attractive city globally, and how can we provide an attractive platform? That's all we need to think about. And venture-backed companies are more likely to fail than succeed, and there will be a lot of trials and errors. And what's important is to provide a system to allow that to happen. And the market should finally determine where to focus on.
問題はですね、やっぱこの日本の仕組みの話に戻ってくるんですけども、さっき
I agree with it, but I think going back to the Japanese institutional issues, you talked about live door. Live door, I think, was a big shock for the venture business in Japan. That is, for aspiring entrepreneurs, it was a major concern. But going back, there used to be the recruit scandal. I don't know if you remember it or not, but the top executive of my company quit as a result of this. But what caused this was because, well, I shouldn't say government officials, but many people graduate from Tokyo University to become bureaucrats. I don't know if I should say this, but after they leave the bureaucracy, they will land plush posts in private sector, etc. And therefore, they could, without regard for cost, work for the betterment of society. But now, with various regulations and restrictions, bureaucrats no longer have a free hand to do what they want. And as a result, the recruit scandal, the live door scandal were all cases in point. But they are throwing these balls at areas which are really at the verge of good or bad. And the really smart bureaucrats will create the rules afterwards to stigmatize these companies and to crush these companies which are working at the very edge of things, of good and bad. And I think we have to cut that chain, that cycle somewhere. How should we cut that chain, that cycle? Ms. Inada of Regulatory Reform Minister, I've talked with her on other occasions. And, we were talking about Uber, and Uber began their services. I'm not advertising for Uber, by the way, but Travis of Uber came last year to speak, and I'm good friends with him. But they are actually involved in 3,000 litigations around the world. They're sued by 3,000 companies. And in Roppongi, I was drinking, and he came 1 hour late. And he said that he was detained in Seoul in a detention area, prison. Apparently for a violation of the road traffic law or something like that. And he was being interrogated in Seoul, and he was just released. And the moment he was released, apparently the police officers came up to him and said, please take a photo with me. So that was a joke. But of course, compliance is important. You have to comply with laws and regulations. You have to have high morals. However, of course, we fought very hard against the bureaucrats, but you shouldn't be too fearful of them. You should not go too much toward the safe side. You must make your point. You must make clear your advocations and fight for what you want. Of course, you can fight at court through litigation, and if necessary, of course, you should ask the people in charge and move forward without fear. Same thing for LCCs. Tony Fernandez was a fighting man. He fought a lot. And I think that sort of challenging spirit is so very important. Well, yesterday I met with Mr. Motegi, the METI minister, and he said the following. Mr. Kumagai, he said, even Toyota, that Toyota started as a venture. Toyota, during its founding days, purchased a several tens of million dollar car from overseas, comprised of 30 million or so, 30,000 parts, and they disassembled the car, copied everything, and started their business. And of course, they started as a textile machinery company. So Toyota was a venture, and he said, it's very important to increase ventures and startups in Japan. And I was thinking, well, I'm a venture too. But in any event, on the internet, you can simultaneously be exposed to information from around the world. So you can study what wonderful services are out there in the world. If everyone in Japan collects information on the internet and locates various wonderful services in Japan and studies it and then change and improve their own ways, I think that would lead to something. So you have to start somewhere. You have to do. You have to act. And what's important is, well, of course, there are many important things in business management, but the most important thing, in my experience, is passion. There's no technology, no capability that exceeds the power of passion. Even if you have technology, without passion, there's no value. So you have to be passionate. You have to go after risk and start up a lot of companies. Don't fear failure, and even if you fail, you should challenge again. So how can we motivate people that way? You tell them to do it. It's very difficult. For example, decoration awards, to change the atmosphere. I think a change in the atmosphere, the climate, is very important. The live door scandal, it's been many years ago, but when something like that happens, people sort of shrink. People in the media, people in the political scene, they should work together to promote ventures. For companies to manufacture something and increase GDP through added value, what they need is human resources. They need physical assets like factories. They need social assets and capital, and they also need technology and education. And of these 5 resources, what we're lacking in Japan is human resources, and the most lacking in human resources is corporate managers and entrepreneurs. If we had more engineers and entrepreneurs, Japan would be a much better country, and I think Japan should change in that direction. During the sessions, I was talking with David from Vertex, Israeli venture capitalist, and he made a recommendation. He said in Israel, they have a failure conference which gathers together all people who failed in ventures to discuss their failures and to learn from their failures. And there are many who succeeded after failure. So next year at the NES, we would like to have one session dedicated to failures. Well, time is running out, but last year, maybe the year before last, there's a business school called IMD in Switzerland, and Nikkei does a lot of business with them, and I went to take a summer school course there for business administrators. This was on a personal level, and there's something that impressed me. One professor who wrote a book talked about care to dare. Care to dare. It rhymes. Dare, that is to become aggressive. Somebody has to give caring support, has to give support. So you ask venture capitalists to jump, to make the jump, but the people would jump if they are fearful of the jump, but if they know that there's a cushion down there where they're going to jump, if there's support available, then they'll be willing to jump. So we have to create that kind of a social system, he said. And that rang a bell for me. Now, you've been involved in ventures. I know you've experienced some ventures. So what do you think is necessary in Japan for young people to become more aware of the need for ventures or more willing to take risks to start up ventures? I think we've talked about this before, but if we have a better atmosphere, a social atmosphere, things will change. And if there's one big arrest or persecution, then the tide will pull back. So, don't be afraid, have courage, because in the end, you can always sue. And I thought, oh, no, I don't want to sue. Going back to recruit, if you think that you may be arrested in the future, you'll really cringe. People will cringe. I think it's a family that the mothers, will always resist if they have a son who wants to go into a venture or startup. They always resist. And I think there's that linear thinking still in Japan. So we need a decoration system, ribbons and awards. Well, I think the fact that the Prime Minister came here, I think the Prime Minister is behind us, and I think the time is behind us, with us. So I think a government support and assistance is so critical. But Prime Minister Abe, I think, wants to make the change because he experienced failure once before, and so I think he's more frank and more willing. But how about the LDP? In the LDP election against the DPJ, many young people lost against the DPJ, but it was those people who have long years of experience as politicians survived during the DPJ administration. So I think there may be some difference in temperature between Abe-san and the LDP. And that's why I refer to the vested interests. But we'd like to start the Innovation Award in summer. Mark Zuckerberg and people, we wanted to create innovation Silicon Valley style, and we wanted to create, our award would be 30 million, and in the United States it's 300 million, so it's 1/10, the same thing as a profitability. In any event, Shinken and Jane would like to start up such an award on our own. Thank you. Well, I think you've been inspired in many ways over these 2 days, and I think it made you willing to work harder from tomorrow. I know that there may be some people who want to ask questions, so just one person, I see a hand. Could I pass on the mic?
Please keep it brief. Please state your name and affiliation first. Reed Monroe Sheridan です。
立ち上げたものなんですけど。
So I'm the one who came overseas and started business in Japan. So yesterday and today, I heard about the matter of working women. When I look around, I do see many females in the audience, which is great. So in Japan, in order to nurture an environment that will promote the use of women more, what specifically should be done? Can you please talk about some ideas? Who is this question directed at? Well, whoever would like to speak up. Actually, Sheryl Sandberg was going to be invited to this event. She said okay, but she had her child's birthday. So Larry or Sheryl Sandberg, I had a very difficult time deciding, but I chose Larry for this time. Meg Whitman and Sheryl Sandberg. We need to see really successful female entrepreneurs. It's very important for other women to see such people. I mean, not necessarily entrepreneurs, but high-growth companies, CEOs. When you see one success example, that will have a major impact. For example, our Tanaka went to Yankees, Nomo went to the Major League first, and he was a pioneer. He opened up the doors for other Japanese players to want to go to the United States and play. So role model is really important. So promoting women within our companies is important as well. So it's all about role model. Sometimes you have to forcefully create role models. That's crucial. Okay, any other comments or ideas? Okay, just one more question. I can see lady. Yes. I work for a major Japanese corporation, and I'm a foreign national. So giving up, thinking that it cannot be helped. I have such experiences, but I have been really strongly inspired by this event today. So we have businessmen, businesswomen sitting in the audience, but they're also parents, maybe, of children when they go home. And some people talked about education. Let me talk about my background. I want my children to be global leaders. So I'm educating my children with 3 languages, trilingual education. And as long as we live in Japan, of course, they have to wear the uniform, and they cannot stick out. The nail that sticks out will be hammered down. And earlier there was a suggestion that if you have a problem in Japan, you can leave Japan and go somewhere else. But there was also a comment about how important education is. And as a parent, when I look at the educational system, I don't have any influence over the educational system, but if you have any suggestions or advice, I would like to hear from you. Okay. You talked about education earlier, so why would you like to respond? In terms of education, language is extremely important. 3 things are important. One is language, and I talked about the 1/10 of profit earlier, but actually this is the same as the language-based breakdown. So we have 120 million people speaking Japanese, but English-speaking people, maybe 2 billion people altogether, 50 countries. So in the era of internet, we are targeting 2 billion people speaking English. So English is extremely important. So language education, foreign language education is really important. And the next important thing is technology. We will have declining population in Japan, so we should invite more people from overseas, but we cannot change things overnight. There may be criminal issues, some other issues. It's not that easy in this island nation of Japan. So in order to strengthen the economy, we have to improve the productivity per capita. And what can we do? We have to use technology. We have to use PC and write code and do development, and we can basically multiply the productivity. So increasing the number of engineers and creators is very important for the Japanese education system. And technology without passion or creativity without passion is meaningless, as I mentioned. So we need to educate people to have motivation, to increase their motivation. So that's another important part of the educational system. Language, technology, and motivation, or mindset education. Those are the 3 important things that are important for the educational system in Japan and the rest of the world. Does that answer your question? And I was very impressed by how fluent your Japanese was. Thank you. Would you like to say something? Well, Peter's sitting right there. And together with Harvard, we are trying to do something with the e-learning. And a professor at Harvard told me that in Heidelberg, the printing technology was invented. And learning and teaching process did not really change for the next several hundred years. But with the emergence of internet, we will now see a major revolution in education. So all the professors will have to be involved in e-learning. So this is a major revolution again. And Udemy's presentation was, well, you heard that, I think. And in some countries, at the primary school level, pupils will watch the online class in advance, and basically when they get to the classroom, they will do the discussion. So it's not all about instruction and memorization. Now, we have to deregulate in Japan the face-to-face regulation, not only for the online sales of drugs, but in Japan there's a law that says education has to happen face-to-face, otherwise it cannot be recognized as credit. That doesn't make any sense. We need to bring in the most advanced educational system to Japan, of course, for English and other subjects as well. Maybe there are not enough teachers. Okay, we can solve that problem with technology. So education is just one of the many applications, but we have to change the mindset, reform people's mindset going forward. Thank you very much. I'm sure that there are many more questions, but I'm sure it will be endless and we need to close at one point. So Mikitani-san, you're making comments to the government at the Industry Competitive Council as well, and Mr. Abe came and made a speech which is a of major significance, and we have to further increase this momentum, and directors of Jane will work hard, but that's not enough. We need to get more support from more people to raise a voice in Japan. So I would like to ask each and every one of you in the audience to share this philosophy and continue to support these activities going forward. So 1,500 people are here today, I think. Well, Slash in Finland has 6,000. We have to have a big audience going forward. So let's try to double and triple the number of participants going forward. I would like to thank Mikitani-san for inviting so many great presenters, and also the staff members who helped organize this event, and also everybody in the audience who put up with this long program over 2 days. So let's give each other a big hand of applause to close the session. Thank you very much.